Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining Global Strategy Execution Summit. Uh, it's a fantastic morning here in India. I hope you guys have a great day or great evening. A quick introduction about the conference, about the speakers, and about the event. Primarily, why this Global Strategy Execution Summit in place? This is something which we would like to start with. You all know, we all know that business is no more simple, easy thing. So there is a quite demanding things, political, environmental, legal, technological changes going on across the world with a pace we never expected. The businesses are going tremendous change at this point of time, like never before. Organizations need to be very agile, very active, very focused to be successful in the business. Now, every organization needs a strategy, and every organization needs a robust strategy execution. So, no matter what we have, there is a scope for improvement. Now, what is a gap now in the strategy professionals or the companies? So every organization needs some kind of help. Okay, whether it could be a best practices, it could be a consultant advisory, or it could be the peer practices, or it could be some kind of innovative solutions, whatever. So organizations need some kind of help. At the same time, there are so many potential sources of getting help. Either it could be through consultants, or it could be through managers, or it could be through technology solutions, or whatever. So what we are trying to do is, through this platform, we are trying to bridge that gap, bring experts, consultants, practitioners, strategists, technicians, and managers across the globe, and then try to express their best of the best approach or experiences or methodologies. Then the attendees who are attending, either it could be a consultants or organizations, managers, or any other consultants. Okay? So they can take a benefit of this to find the right help or right ideas. So you can just take this to start with. So sometimes what happens, even myself, I get some very nice idea from attending to any lecture or something. So that is fantastic way to solve current problems of an individual. So with this intention, through strategy, a comprehensive strategy execution solution by Data Labs India. So we are proud sponsors of this event. I'm very proud to say that I'm the solution architect for strategy, along with my team, of course. So we are proud sponsors, and I take this as an opportunity to invite all participants, speakers, and organizers. Thank you, organizers, for making this event very organized. Thank you, Deep, and your team for this. So I think we are waiting. I know you guys are waiting for the first program to start with. Okay, so I'll just take 1 second to introduce our program. Okay, so let me just take schedule. Okay. So I would like to start. Let us start now the program. The first thing is, so we have a first session from Mihai Ionescu. So this will be a great opportunity for all of us to hear him with all his experience and research and practice in this industry. As a quick introduction from Mihai has dedicated 15 years to understanding, refining, and applying in practice the strategy's full cycle process. Through rigorous practice and continuous study, he has synthesized an integrative platform framework that connects the dots. Okay, that connects the dots of most relevant concepts, theories, and methodologies in strategy management. This refined approach not only encapsulates the essence of strategy thinking, but also offers a practical insights and actionable steps so that organizations gets a benefit. So I invite Mr. Mihai Ionescu to present his approach and help the participants to know his approach, and also suggestions or recommendations in general how to do the strategy management in your organization and how you take the benefit of it. Mr. Mihai, over to you. Thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you for the introduction, Abdul. Let me first of all see how can I get the slides. Okay, excellent, fantastic. So first of all, I must compliment what you're saying, maybe with a little bit of a correction. I have no approach to strategy. None of the approaches, none of the things that I'm presenting are mine. All of them have been created by a lot of thinkers and leaders of opinion and people who accumulated a lot of experience in formulating and in executing strategy. So the only thing that I did was just to connect the dots and try to put things in a logical, integrated format that allows us to take what is essential for being able to go through all this cycle of strategy management, from strategy experimentation to strategy formulation to strategy execution. So that's what I did, and I did that because I'm also an engineer, and engineers tend to find the logic in things, and I think that's what I have done, and what I'm also interested to continuing to do. So the first idea that I would like to share with you is the fact that strategy is not simple. You might hear people telling you that strategy is about ABC or 1, 2, 3 and stuff like this. I would advise you to consider that with a grain of salt, and understand that true expertise in strategy management comes from people who have succeeded to perform in practice thousands and thousands of implementation of frameworks which got better and better along decades of not just theory or not just quick drawing of silver bullets. It's a huge work that allows us to understand how strategy works, and of course it is not simple. Now, the principles the strategy is based as, and the processes that allow us to manage strategy, the ones that I have mentioned, these are simple principles. And if someone tries to convince you that there is something simple about the strategy, that should be regard the principles, which should be very easy and very clearly to be understood. But then, when we apply these principles to something as complex as an organization, and I don't think that except maybe some startups, organizations are simple. They are complex constructs of relationships and structures and people and processes. There is no simple thing about an organization. If you want to get a hint, just look at the budgeting process and see how complex a budget of an organization is, just to understand how complex a business can be. So when we do apply the simple principles of strategy to a complex organization, what we get is something that is a complex strategy. Because in complex organizations, strategy is complex. And if you want to have a good management of strategy, you need to understand all the aspects and facets and all the turning wheels inside the high accuracy mechanisms that the strategy management system should be. So now I'd like to invite you on a very quick journey on what is the cycle of the strategy and actually see what is behind the complexity, which is assembled from simple principles. So the thing that I would like to start from is this. This is a diagram that summarizes how strategy is managed. You can see that there are two loops, and strategy is always a cycle. It's a cycle that goes through a strategy formulation loop with a number of stages that allows us to go step by step and assemble the strategy from a number of logical principles and information that we have available. And once we have formulated our strategy, we can start to implement it or to execute the strategy. And that is the second loop that you see on the right. And in principle, this is the Kaplan and Norton framework for strategy execution, also known as a balanced scorecard. And why is this a way to focus on strategy execution when it gets there? Because this is no framework that has been created by someone on the corner of the kitchen table. This is something that resulted from the work of hundreds of consultants who have implemented or assessed more than 10,000 implementation of this framework in all countries around the world, in all industries, in all sizes and types of organization. You cannot beat the Kaplan and Norton execution premium process by any kind of a different approach when we talk about strategy execution. That's why we have this as a foundation of the strategy execution loop. Now, the strategy formulation, is not something that is based only on, let's say, as good as possible hypotheses about the future, because strategy is a construct of hypothesis. This is something that requires a little bit of testing, a little bit of experimentation, and that is what strategy experimentation does. Strategy experimentation looks at several things that can be tested with real customers in a limited environment, of course, but then it allows us to understand if any hypothesis that we're using to develop, to build our strategy, makes sense for the people in the real world, in the real markets that we are performing business in. And I would like to invite you to go a little bit through each of these loops and understand maybe a little bit of what do we mean. Just before going further, you see that the strategy experimentation, it's a prerequisite set of processes, which means that they go in parallel with the strategy cycle, with the two loops of strategy formulation and strategy execution. It has some sort of life of its own, but it is synchronized with the strategy cycle in order to add more and more information about potential other things that we can do as part of the strategy. And also, another prerequisite is scenario planning, which is essential for being able to operate in a real world with uncertainties that can throw us from left to right in the environment of related to technology, to politics, to demographics, to climate, and so on. So scenarios are very important because our strategy needs to be able to provide us the necessary outcomes, the necessary desired outcomes, whatever the scenario might turn into reality. Okay, so these are some sort of prerequisites in strategy experimentation. So strategy experimentation needs to be coordinated. Be coordinated with the rest of the strategy cycle, because we would like to perform experiments like types of products, like kinds of jobs to be done that our strategy value propositions can address. And also we need to play with strategy choices and to see if any of the multiple strategy choices that we haven't used before are actually candidates allowing us to build a new competitive advantage and the value propositions that will allow us to continue to have a thriving business beyond the inflection points which are defined by the strategic horizon. So let's go into this journey after the prerequisite stages of the strategy cycle have been accomplished. So let's look into strategy formulation. Now, strategy formulation starts from strategic analysis, and strategic analysis needs to define several things. It needs to define the business portfolio, which are the current competitive advantage that we would like to develop and extend and defend as part of our strategy, and also how to build a new competitive advantage based on emerging technologies, on the emerging trends, and on new concepts about doing business in a market or in another, in an industry or in another, in around the core business and beyond the core business that we currently have. And this is the business portfolios that we need to define. And of course, as part of this, we need to take into consideration the scenarios, the strategic scenarios that we have defined based on a specific methodologies that you can learn from a variety of sources. And once we do this, we are enabled with what is needed for us to identify the paramount challenges, which is a starting point of building the new strategy. It's not the mission, vision, values, no the other stuff like this. It's actually the paramount challenges. So Richard Rumelt calls them the gnarliest challenges. So there are things that cannot be really solved quickly. It cannot be solved easy. So we need to confront them and overcome them. And we can define the paramount challenges based on the analysis of what we are, how are we positioned today, about the trends that defines the future, about uncertainties that defines the future, about the weak signals that defines the future, and understand that our current strategy, our current positioning cannot overcome the challenge, all the opportunities and threats that are coming towards us from the future. So therefore, we need to define those challenges, and around those challenges, to try to find other strategic choices that allow us to position us better along the current competitive advantage, along the new competitive advantage that we need to build and bring to maturity, along the timelines that we have until the edge of the strategic horizon. And in order to do this, of course, it is highly recommendable that we use something that is a reference cognitive model for strategic choices. And starting from Porter generic strategies, from Arnoldo Huck's Delta model, we can understand that there are a number of choices that we should look like, choices that we are also using as part of one side of the strategy experimentation. And we need to evaluate all these strategic choices types in order to understand which ones are allowing us to better deal and surmount the paramount challenges that we are confronted in the near and in the medium future and further future of our business, of our organization. So that is how we take decision about the strategic choices that position our business along the current competitive advantage, along the next competitive advantage, with all the value propositions that we're actually bringing to the market for them. And that is something that we need to do as a foundation of the strategy. Our strategy is based, it's founded on the choices that we are making to do some things and not to do others. And of course, choices are just a wish, just a desire. To turn them into reality, we need to understand for each value proposition that is part of the new positioning of the two types of competitive advantages, the current one and the next one. And we need to understand which is the activity system, something that you might remember from reading Michael Porter about what an activity system is. And for that activity system, understand the success factors of why our value proposition would be successful along the timeline in the market, in the current or future markets that we would like to target. And then from there to understand which are the capabilities, the competencies, the processes, the relationships, the infrastructure, the knowledge that we require in order to, as capabilities, in order to turn those strategic choices and the activity systems that we have, one for each value proposition, to turn them into reality. And turning them into reality, it means a little more than just defining the required capabilities. We need to understand that we might have some of those capabilities already existing in our business today. There are things that we have done, we know how to do them, but very often it's not enough. We need new capabilities, new competencies, new technologies, new infrastructure, new processes, new business models, new environments, partner environments that we need along in order to be able to satisfy the demands of the new positions that we have defined for coping with the paramount challenges. So we're talking here about the gaps in capabilities, gaps in positioning that we need to close. Once we close those gaps, our strategy is fully implemented. We can get the benefits of the new strategy. If we could close all those gaps by tomorrow morning we would have our strategy fully implemented, and we would just benefit from the new positionings that we have. We will have a stronger competitive advantage today and ready to launch a new competitive advantage that will take its place beyond the strategic horizon. But we cannot do that by tomorrow morning. We need to go through a number of execution cycles in order to be able to implement the strategy, to execute the strategy, and close in sequence all those strategic gaps that we have defined. And before we do that, of course, what is required for us is to validate that all those concepts and all those ideas and all those choices and closing of all those gaps, it's something that we can do. And that's why we need to assess the feasibility of our strategy, of executing our strategy, and also to go beyond that and say, okay, if we had tomorrow morning our strategy implemented, the resulting business model or business models, would they be financially viable? Would they be sustainable? So this is something that we need to also assess as well as we can, because we wouldn't like to launch in executing a strategy that we cannot execute, or to execute a strategy that will lead us to something that is not sustainable and doesn't provide the financial returns that are required from evolving and for growing our business. But assuming that everything is fine, because if it isn't, we need to just go back through the formulation loop and make other choices and assess other capabilities. But assuming that everything is fine, we need to go into strategy execution. Now, it's important to clarify that strategy formulation, it's a multi-annual cycle. So the cycles that you see in the middle, on the top, it's actually a multi-annual cycle. However, for a variety of reasons, technicalities and conceptual, we cannot actually do planning for a multi-annual horizon. We need to do planning on shorter terms, and typically the term for the strategy execution cycle is 1 year. And look at the budget, look at the sales planning, look at all the operational planning that we have, and other cycles that we have in operations. And you can see that it's essential to synchronize strategy execution with operational planning and executing those plans. So that's why strategy execution is very often an yearly cycle, which means that along the sequence of years inside the strategy formulation and the cycle of strategy formulation, we have multiple strategy execution cycles, and those execution cycles will obviously push us to plan things, actually to produce a strategic plan for each year, with the share of strategic gaps that we have to close and the ways that they have been defined by formulating our strategy. And then to close, to plan what is necessary to close those gaps and advance towards the positioning that has been defined as part of our strategy. So Everything that you see on the right, as I've mentioned, it's based on the last 5 stages of the Kaplan and Norton strategy execution process, premium process. And after we do the strategic planning, which many of you might be familiar, using strategic objectives and KPIs and K risk indicators, and then strategic initiatives, we need to bring that closer to where it's executed, and strategy is executed at the bottom of the organization. It's executed at individual level. And in order to get there, we need to go through an alignment process, which is not just a vertical cascading. It's much more complex than that, because there are internal customers and internal suppliers which interact on a daily basis during the operations, and they need to also do what is needed to change their part of the business and to contribute to achieving the objectives that we have defined for this annual strategic plan, in order to close the strategic gaps, a part of the strategic gaps defined by the strategy. So we go through this alignment process, and then from there we also need to synchronize with operations. How can we implement strategy if the budget, for instance, haven't been synchronized with all the expenses required by the strategic initiative, by the projects that are going to allow us to close the gap and achieve the strategic objectives? If we don't do that kind of integration, that's not going to happen. And it's not just the budget. It's also a variety of operational plans. Sales plans need to take into consideration what changes are we going to produce, what value propositions are we launching this year, what kind of channels are we opening, what kind of new processes are we launching, what kind of evolution of the business ecosystem are we producing this year, because that will influence the revenue and their targeting and all the activities that sales must do. And the same is for marketing, the same is for production and research and development and technology and logistics, and everybody who does plans needs to synchronize them with a strategic plan. And if we don't do that, we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot, because executing strategy won't be really possible. Okay, so once we have done that, we need to go into executing the strategic plan, again, with all the business units and departments and down to individual level, and to perform all those projects which are strategic initiatives. And guess what? Because Khalid, I will answer your question at the end. Thank you. So because the entire systems that you see, the strategy model and the strategic plan model is based on a number of hypotheses. Actually, strategy is a construct of hypotheses about the future. There is no other way to do strategy except by making assumptions about the future, educated assumptions and educated hypotheses based on the information that we have. And then some of those hypotheses will turn out to be invalid. It's impossible to have so many assumptions and hypotheses and all of them to be correct, to be valid. Some of them are always invalid, and we will find out which ones at the right time as we execute our strategy. So that's why in executing our strategic plan, we're going to see a number of good and bad results. And you will see green, yellow, and red in scorecards. And whenever you say what has gone wrong, well, what has gone wrong is not about the strategic initiatives, those projects not producing the effects that we wanted. It might be something wrong with any of the hypotheses that we have employed, even when formulating the strategy. So therefore, we need a system of applying corrective actions, and also a system of adapting both the strategy and the strategic plan as soon as we find out that we have employed some invalid hypotheses. That is a purpose in strategy execution of using KPIs and scorecards, is to validate hypotheses, not to measure past results and produce reports. This is about validating of hypotheses that we have employed in building the strategy model, in building the strategic plan model. And this is how we return to the strategy formulation cycle, and we might be required to reformulate part of the strategy, and then propagate throughout this ambidextrous strategy of current and next competitive advantage, propagates that into the strategic plan, makes the necessary changes, and continue the execution of an adapted strategic plan. And then, of course, once we approach the end of the year, again, go into strategy formulation, understand that we have successfully closed the strategic gaps that were supposed to close in the years that passed or not, and then, of course, adapt the scheduling of what strategic gaps should be closed in the next year, and then go on and pass through the next strategy execution cycle until we have reached the strategic horizon where our strategy is fully implemented and we have benefited from harvesting the current competitive advantage and preparing and bringing to maturity the next competitive advantage that will allow us to continue growing beyond the inflection points of our industry that we have defined as a strategic horizon. Now, this is the cycle of strategy. And it's not simple. As you can see, it's not simple. It's rather complex, but it's made out of simple logic and simple concepts. And every of these stages, the 5 stages plus the prerequisite processes, they use simple logic and they use simple concepts and principles. And but we need to assemble that in something that is as complex as our organization. So this was my presentation. I wanted just to tell you that in September we have a new edition, as a 3rd edition of the Explaining Strategy online live course. And if you want to learn more about the strategy cycles that you have seen, I invite you to enroll. The enrollment it's open, so you have like 88 days to do that. And of course, if you do it sooner, it's going to be even better for you from the financial point of view. You'll get the early bird discount, and also this is something that implements the fair pricing policy, which means that depending on the country where you live, the course might be cheaper than the standard price. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I don't know if I've spent all the time allocated or not, but if there is any time remaining, I'm happy to.
Yeah, you have time remaining, Mihai. Okay. So one of the couple of questions I received in my personal note is, now in the strategy cycle, the formulation, especially the formulation part. Okay. So the guys are asking how much time it takes per mid-size organization. Okay, there are so many steps in the strategy clockwise, the process you have explained. So how much time approximately it takes? So that is very important for them. That's what I just put up the question. I would like to just brief about it.
Okay, so on average 2 months, but you need to understand, when you are at the beginning of a strategy cycle, when you finished implementing a strategy and just prepare to launch a new cycle of strategy, have finished closing all those strategic gaps, and you get to be confronted with new paramount challenges that requires you a new strategy. It might take longer, like 2 months, 2 months and a half. But then every year after that, it only takes you probably even less. It might take you a month just to reformulate part of the strategy, reconfirm the strategic choices that you have to close in the next year, and that's more than enough. And consider the fact that the strategy adaptation, which is a partial reformulation of the strategy, happens all the year. Whenever we encounter the effects of some invalid hypotheses that are related to some components of the strategy model of the strategy that we have defined, we need to change those hypotheses with some valid ones, modify the corresponding components of the model, and propagate that throughout the entire cycle back to down to the strategic planning, and update the strategic plan as well. So that's why strategy formulation is just a way to reconfirm something that we already decided when we are in year 2 or 3 or 4 of the strategy cycle. Initially, it might take 2 months, but then every year it will take less.
Okay. One more question is the strategy analysis part, okay, which you do like Pestel or whatever, porters. So how it's always a challenge to do the strategy formulation from the internal team. Okay, so they might not have experience or they might have limited exposure. So what do you advise for the organizations to do the strategy analysis, which is the first part of your cycle?
Well, strategy analysis it can be very, very simply understood. We need to understand how the future looks like, and as much as possible for our industry, but also for some other industries that we might be more interesting for us to do business in the future. So we need to have a certain coverage, not just strictly related to our industry, but also to something an extended arena, as Rita McGrath suggests, and we should try to understand which are the trends, which are the weak signals. Now, weak signals are potential future trends, but because they are potential future trends, we need to select those important and those relevant ones and include them in our analysis as well. Because as we advance with executing our strategy, some of the weak signals might turn into trends. So that's why we need to take them into consideration as well. And then we need to understand which are the uncertainties and the key uncertainties. We just pick the most critical uncertainties and build strategic horizons with them, because that needs to be done as part of the strategic analysis as well. And of course, that needs to be updated every year or even often. That's why we have an early warning system. Our strategy system needs to monitor all the hypotheses related to external environments that we have used, we employed to build our strategy. And whenever one of those hypotheses, those parameters that we have used are actually changing, that's an alarm that we should get and go and say, okay, this hypothesis about this parameter was not correct, was not adequate. Let's change it and update the strategy, update the strategic plan, and have a continuously updating process about our strategy. We can't simply sit on a 5-year plan or on a yearly plan for the strategic for our strategy execution. All this needs to be continuously adaptive, and that's why we have monthly strategy review meetings. And whenever we understand that something is wrong with one of our hypotheses that we used as part of our strategies, need to go back, change it, reassess, and continuously adapt the strategy. Strategies is a very moving thing, and we need to keep it moving, because otherwise, if we are stuck in a 5 years timeline or in a 1 year timeline, that's not acceptable anymore in current times.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, the hypothesis you have made, or the assumptions, or the strategy indicators, whatever you call. So these, apart from during your monthly review process or a quarterly review process, whatever we do. So these, the assumptions, what we made, we have to make sure that these assumptions are valid or not. Okay. Okay. So exactly. These are the things. Who will report this? Is it like an Office of Strategy Management, or is it the CEO office? How is that in practice?
There is the Office of Strategy Management, which might be, not just the Office of Strategy Execution, because now we need to, as you have seen, to correlate a variety of things. We need to correlate with strategy experimentation and reformulating the strategy. So it's quite a complex job. But these people are actually only coordinating. All the decisions are our group decision, taken by the executive team in a continuous consultation with everybody. With the down to the field level, because any hypothesis that we employ or change because we need to adapt and realize that it's invalid, that needs to be checked with the people who have direct contact with the customers, with the suppliers, with the competitors. So we must open the strategy towards everybody in the organization and understand what needs to be done to get some as valid as possible hypothesis. Everybody in the organization can help us use, if possible, only as valid as because they might come with information and knowledge and something that the executive team is not aware of. So that's why this is an open process with the rest of the organization. So this is why the Office of Strategy Management, which some sort of PMO of strategy. Yeah, it's like a project management office. That's what they do. They coordinate people. They don't. The PMO doesn't do the projects. They just coordinate them. The people in the organization do the project. Exactly in the same way is happening with strategy. But of course, you need to have in your organization a door and a sign on the door that says Office of Strategy Management. It doesn't matter if it's one person or there are 10 per person behind that door, but there is someone who's made accountable and responsible for coordinating all these cycles and all this information. And these are people which need to understand the full complexity. Everybody else in the organization don't need to be involved with all the complexity of the cycle and the stages that you have seen, because we only need to present them with the part that they are contributing to the strategy formulation and strategy execution. So yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So it's not only the strategy, you made a very nice strategy plan. It's not enough. Okay, you have to make sure that this is executed month-on-month basis. Okay, and then even the assumptions what we have made has to be validated again and again. So so what you are saying, basically the strategy planning and strategy execution, strategy formulation, planning and execution is very dynamic thing. So if somebody is thinking that hire a consultant, do a strategy, a nice strategy plan, and just send this consultant out, and then you do it your own, then you are doing something, you may mess it up, the whole thing.
Yeah, you're playing with dinosaurs, and you'll get to be a dinosaur as well. That's not how consulting is done anymore. Maybe it was done, 30, 40 years ago, but it doesn't. There is no better expert in your environment, in your markets, in your industry than yourself. With the people in the organization. Any consultant, the only thing that a consultant can do is to guide you along a process. That it's an assembly of frameworks that have been tested otherwise. I'm sorry, somewhere else, and it has been tested again and again. And this is a guideline and a way to avoid the full trial and error cycle. You can actually shorten the trial and error by starting from someone that the consultant guides you on doing. But then the expertise doesn't come from the consultant; comes from inside the company.
Mm-hmm. The industry part, the industry thing. As a company owner or a CEO, so you know the industry, your business more than anybody else. Okay, exactly. So you cannot expect a consultant. Maybe he's very nice, very very talkative, or very experienced, but he don't know your business. So all you need to do is take his help as much as possible in the process, and then you take a decision. That's fantastic. And we have a couple of questions, Mihai. Khalid. He asked about winning aspiration or target for strategy plan for 3 to 5 years. How to set a winning aspiration? That's a very generic question. So maybe you can just brief.
Yeah. Winning aspiration is relating to. I used to take into consideration the winning aspiration as some frameworks are recommending, but then I understood that actually what we are dealing with are some challenges in the future. And the winning aspiration and even the it's not really a strategic plan. It's a strategy implementation plan of many years, and then it has yearly strategic plans. And I think that the winning aspirations that we should have is in successfully overcoming the paramount challenges that we are going to be confronted with along the next couple of years. So then we need to understand, okay, we have identified this major challenge. What would look like us overcoming that challenge successfully? And we need to understand what does it mean. What would be the market reaction, the customer feedback, the partner feedback, the financial return results? What would be something that we would signal us that we have successfully overcome that paramount challenge? And I would start from paramount challenges, because they are more tangible than just winning aspiration, some wishes that we double our sales value or whatever we might wish for.
I hope, Khalid, you got answered. And there is an extended question from Volkan. Yeah. So in the context of 3 to 5 year strategy plans, if the revenue targets are not exactly met, is it correct to call strategy unsuccessful? A second and beyond yours mentioned.
Yeah,
I think it's very interesting.
Well, first of all, you might have a strategy that doesn't necessarily produce certain revenue in the beginning. You might lose money in the beginning when you implement a new strategy, because you have positioned your head ahead of the experience curve in a place where actually you can scale the business without necessarily scaling the revenue. But then, because you have done that, you have entered into a virtuous cycle that allows you to maintain leadership in the leadership position in the market for an extended period of time. So if we haven't, however, met some of the targets that we wanted, it means that we have employed somewhere in the model of the strategy, in the model of the strategic plan, some invalid hypothesis. And keeping the traceability of the decisions that we have taken with all the hypotheses that we have employed, and there is no other way, it's about the future. We have to employ hypotheses and assumptions. So we use them logically, and then we construct all this model of our strategy with choices and capabilities and whatever is required to overcome our identified challenges, valid in all scenarios. And then we need to understand that if the results are not good enough, somewhere we have employed an invalid hypothesis. Because everything is traceable, we can go back step by step and identify the invalid hypothesis that we have used, change it with a valid one, as we have just learned what is valid and invalid, and adapt that part of the strategy with corresponding adaptation of a part of the strategic plan, and actually continue towards better results. And we need to continuously assess the outcomes that we are aiming for in order to understand where exactly are the invalid hypotheses. Just to be clear, when we're talking about strategy, some of the hypotheses that we're building the strategy on and the strategic plan on are always going to be invalid. We don't know which ones at this moment in time. We will find out as we will execute the strategy. So we just need to understand where have we gone wrong, what hypothesis it was turned out to be invalid, and in order to do that, we need to have a very clear traceability with a hypothesis register and understand how we have come to have this strategy, how to take those decisions, how to position ourselves in a certain way, how to bring some new value propositions to the market. And if the results are not the ones that we wanted, we need to go back and understand, have we misunderstood some of the market trends in the strategic analysis? We haven't maybe taken into consideration some weak signals. Are we in a negative scenario that we haven't assessed correctly against our strategy, and we built a strategy that is good in one scenario, but bad in another scenario? We can't do that. We need to understand that our strategy needs to be to produce at least acceptable results in any scenario. So you see, there is a process of assessing, of first of all, building a very logical trace and step-by-step logical assembly of decision. And each decision is based on hypotheses about the future. Go back and understand where have we employed an invalid hypothesis, and even the logic itself sometimes turn out to show that maybe it's obsolete, and we need to modify even the logic that we use in each of those stages, and then go on with an adapted strategy, replacing an invalid hypothesis, and hope that from this moment on we will encounter better results in implementing our strategy.
Does the scenario planning help you to manage? You don't have to wait for another year to see whether the required results are coming or not. Okay, so you can, revenue, achieving revenues is one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the major important, as you said, Mihai. So there will be other things which you want to achieve during this period. So how the scenario planning will help you to plan this?
Well, scenario planning needs to understand that there are multiple plausible futures, and we can identify the most significant ones, and then understand that our strategy needs to have good results, at least acceptable results, whichever scenarios actually prevails. Because when we build a number of scenarios, we don't know which ones will prevail. We just have, okay, any of them can happen. So therefore, once we understand that one of those scenarios is prevailing, we should be executing a strategy that still produces good results in that scenario. Because any of the scenarios which might prevail, we should still have a valid strategy that produces acceptable results in those conditions. So that's how we use scenario planning. We can't build one strategy for each scenario. No, I know that this is a tempting idea, but it doesn't work, because switching from one strategy for one scenario to another strategy that is best for another scenario is very costly, and actually it even in most cases it's actually even produces results that are worse than actually having a strategy that is not well fitted for a scenario.
So that's a great explanation, Mihai. So when you are doing a strategy reviews in a monthly or quarterly basis, you also need to make sure that which scenario is active and which scenario is not active. Okay, and then just pay attention to the whatever scenario which is active, and then make sure that you take appropriate actions. While you do scenario planning, you also have an action plan for that. For a particular scenario, if it is activated, so this is the action you're going to take, right? So this makes a strategy execution process so dynamic that organization needs to be alert, like operations.
Yeah, we need to understand that scenarios are built on influence factors that if their uncertainty would be reduced, they would be actually trends that we would be building our strategy on. But because they are highly uncertain, we cannot build our strategy on so much uncertainty. So we select the trends which are relatively certain. We build a strategy based on them. And some of them are not just trends. There might be some weak signals that will potentially become trends. And this is how we build our strategy. But then all the highest uncertainties are actually defining our parameters that defines the scenarios. Now, those uncertainties are because there are also factors that we assess about the markets and politics and the environment and economics in general and demographics. Those can change, which means that we still have to have some sort of monitoring system, the same as the early warning system for the strategy. And as soon as some of the parameters that we have assessed in order to define our scenarios are changing, we might just go back and redo the scenario planning. And again, we need to once we do that, to check that our strategy remains still viable in each of the scenarios. So that's how we move ahead with scenario planning. Is as dynamic as a strategy. So, and again, the concept of the hypothesis that we use about the future, for instance, in selecting which are the critical uncertainties to use in building scenarios, all those hypotheses needs to be continuously evaluated, and whenever something indicates that we're using a hypothesis that turned out to be invalid, we just need to go back and whatever we have built based on that those invalid hypotheses needs to be reconstructed. That part of the strategy, even the scenario planning itself.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mihai. It was a great session. I think just last question to you is the whole strategy clockwise. The process what you have nicely explained, okay, is that mid-size smaller companies also can do that? Okay, so if so, how can do that little easier? Can you just throw a light on that?
Well, again, you might be lured by people who are going to tell you that you can do strategy in simple steps, and because you maybe are not such a big company, so forget about all the complex strategies that only for big companies, and you should do some simple stuff. At the end of the day, you're going to be fully confused because you're not going to understand how strategy works and what needs to be done in order to implement the strategy. So what you have seen as a full cycle of strategy, it is very simple to be used, and I have used it, for instance, myself. Most of what you've seen in small and medium organization, most of my experience comes from that area, and it's fully usable in the ways that has been described. Again, I'm sorry to present you again with this message, but if you want to know more, enroll in the course and you'll know more.
This is very important because the strategy formulation is most ignored part in the organizations, especially in the small part. They see that they know everything. Okay, so doing a strategy formulation will definitely help you to be more successful. Okay, at least it will not harm you. So you do a calculated, informed decisions. So that's great message, Mihai. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please keep posting. Even if you want to know more about Mihai, any questions, please post us. Our organizers will compile them and then bring your questions and answer. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mihai. Fantastic morning to you, and it was a great session indeed, like as usual. Yeah, thank you.
I wish you good luck with all the presentation and the discussions further on. And thank you very much for this opportunity of sharing some of my idea with the audience.
Thank you very much, Mihai.